everybody can. So I'm just going to dive right in. Again, I have the chat screen open, so I'll try to monitor it as I go. So please forgive me if I miss anything. So I have made a few additions to the Central Library's Section 508 LibGuide. Specifically, these are going to be under the Creating Accessible Documents tab. On here, we do still have the list of the main elements that we are looking for when documents are submitted to the repository. So our big five, as we call them, the tagged content, bookmarks, alt text, reading order, and document properties. We do still have checklists available on here, and I have actually added some additional information on InDesign. I have gotten a lot of questions over the past few months about making documents accessible in InDesign and converting InDesign documents into Adobe Acrobat Pro. There's some information here. Again, I personally do not have InDesign, so I'm not a wonderful resource, but I do try to continue to find new and additional resources for everyone, and I will keep this updated as I find them. I also want to draw everyone's attention to under additional accessibility resources by attribute type. I have added in a couple things about alternative text, one of which is the WebAIM alternative text page, which I have open here. This is a really great resource. It's going to cover a number of different instances of or a number of different types of alternate text. When you have a simple image, when you have an image with a caption, what to do in specific contexts. So I have a few examples. I'm going to go over it pretty thoroughly, but I just want everyone to have access to this. It's a great resource that I reference frequently. In addition, I have also added what's called an alt text decision tree. This is available through W3C, the W3C Schools and Initiative. And on here, you can sort of follow the path of this is what my image is. What sort of alt text should I be applying? Do I even need to apply alt text? And again, we'll go over that and I'll keep referencing the decision tree, but it's a really useful resource that we've added onto the LibGuide. You'll also notice there's a whole new section on tables. I do have some basic table information in here. The table concepts is going to go over the difference between layout tables and data tables and how to set those up and how to distinguish between the two. I do have information on using Adobe Pro's table editor tool, and then there's also some information on how to appropriately tag a table. So how to tag header rows, what's a data cell, how to make sure that the elements within each cell are actually being read when they're when someone's using a screen reader or a Braille translator. And then there's also another resource on here, again from WebAIM, which in general is just a great resource. So I recommend everyone take a look at WebAIM and go through their resources on creating accessible tables. That specifically covers mostly data tables. There is a little bit about layout tables, but it spends more time with data tables, which for our purposes is primarily what we have in our documents. And then lastly, I've gotten a number of questions about formulas and equations. We have a number of those in our resources as well. So there are 4 examples here. The last one, MathML, is pretty technical. A lot of that's used online. If you're able to use it, please do. If not, there are a few other options. FHA, the Federal Highway Administration, does have a nice list and examples of how they handle equations and formulas. Specifically, I'd like to highlight UCF, their resource on creating accessible equations in Microsoft Word. This also applies to Adobe as well. They provide some really nice examples of what the alt text should say. So just to highlight one of them, this first one, it provides you with the equation and then 3 options. And to be clear, any of those 3 options would work. I understand that a lot of people who are doing some of the 508 work are not scientists, they're not mathematicians, they don't necessarily know exactly what those equations mean. I'd like to just highlight this last one. This is the basic that we are looking for. F equals G times blah, 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 blah. Very basic. V equals D over T. That's all we need. It's something just to convey the very basics to someone who cannot see the equation. So those are the main things I've added to the LibGuide. Again, I constantly update this. I should say I update it when I have the chance or when when I find new resources. If there's anything that any of you find and you'd like to share it with everyone, please let me know. I'm always willing to take feedback, any additional resources other people have run across. I'm happy to put them up here so we can all share and learn from each other. So with that being said, I'm going to actually jump into looking at document properties. Hopefully everyone can see my PDF. So what I have here is one of the library's documents that we produce. We do bibliometrics. So this is one of our bibliometric analysis reports that we put out. This one's from 2017, so it's a little bit older. And what I want to cover first is some general document properties. Document properties that we focus on when we do checks for items are the title of the document needs to be put in, and also the language. So when I run an accessibility check on this document, we will see under document that the title has failed. And I want to point out there are two ways to fix this. One, you can right click on this element and simply click fix. In the title field, you can take this out and under title, put in your title there, right? Or the way I prefer, and then this way you can kind of kill two birds with one stone. If you right click on the document, go all the way down, there's document properties at the bottom. If you go to document properties, the first one that should come up is description, and you'll see it has the file name, there's room for title, author, subject, so on and so forth. Again, the part we care about is the title. So you can type in the title, so on and so forth. We do not require author, subject, or keywords. We highly encourage people to do this. So I am going to just add in Sarah's name. And then we encourage people to put in author, subject, and keywords. Again, it's not required. All of these elements help in regards to search engine optimization. The NOAA institutional repository is Google indexed. So the more things we can do to make sure our materials within the repository are search engine optimized means the higher likelihood of people discovering those items when they're trying to Google things. So under description, we're going to focus on title. Anything else you add in is gravy, and we'd love to see it. And then the other tab I want people to pay attention to is initial view. When you click on initial view, it gives you information about layout and magnification. These are sort of default settings. So when you open up Adobe, when you open a document in Adobe, this is sort of what you see. But if you notice, there's an option here for, there's a section here for window options. And at the very bottom, there's one that says show. Here, I have mine on document title. Oftentimes when you go in, it will say file name. It should be under document title. That'll help ensure that the title shows up appropriately once you change that information. Okay, and then under advanced, this is where you're going to set your reading options and your language. Most of our materials are in English, so we want it to be set to English. If your material is in a different language, you would of course want to set the language to match. Once you have entered in all that information, you just click OK. And you'll see up here where I had my file name, I now have the title information. And then when I recheck this, my title has now passed. Okay, just a quick review of document properties. I just want to make sure everyone knows what we're looking for. Again, just the document title and the language are required. Any additional metadata that you put in there, though, is much appreciated, but not required. So we would never return a document because you didn't put in the author. That's not what we're looking for, but we love to see it in there. All right, so the next thing I'm going to move to is we're going to talk a little bit about alternative text. You know what, let me check the chat real quick. So Don is asking if the library has any suggestions about meaningful keywords to put in there if someone was to add keywords. No, generally we would suggest if you're going to put in keywords, put in keywords that you would use when you submit keywords to a journal, or keywords that you know your users, researchers would be searching for. There isn't any sort of controlled vocabulary or anything like that. Think of them kind of as tags. And then under document property authors, should it be the full name or just the first name of the author or just the first author or everybody? Ideally, it would have the full name of all the authors. I believe it's all the authors, just regular reading order of names separated by comma is what I see most often. But again, if you just put in the first author, that's also fine here. I think I just put in Sarah's name. I did not put Jamie in, but something is better than nothing. And if you have the time and ability, we'd love to see all the authors in there. It means that if anyone's searching for, maybe the third author's name, that document may pop up in their Google search. So as I said, I'm going to move over to alternate text now, and we're going to spend a fair amount of time on this. So again, there's the alternate text tab or section in your accessibility checker. When you click on the caret, it'll drop everything down. When you click on the item, it's going to highlight the item for you. And can't see me pointing in blue. So anytime you go through, it'll highlight whatever the figure is for you in blue. Okay. The easiest way to fix your alt text once you have it in Adobe is to right click and click fix. What it'll do is it'll help you tab through everything. Okay, so it'll start with the first one. And I wanted to go over these specific examples because these are really similar to a lot of the items that we're getting. A lot of papers that are submitted to us have graphs and charts, and then I think we have a word cloud in here and possibly a map. So these are what's considered complex images. And complex images sort of require a different approach to alt text. When it's a simple picture of, George Washington and there's no caption, you can just simply put in alt text of George Washington and you're done. If you have something like this, you would assume there's a caption, so you sort of have to think about what's in the caption, what's in the text around the document, around the figure. So you don't, the idea behind alt text is you don't want to repeat information that's already being read to the person or that's already being conveyed. So you don't want repetitive, duplicative information. So ideally, you don't just copy over the caption, although we have said that that's okay in most cases. It is not a best practice. So we've been trying to think of ways to help people come up with easier sort of alt text. So I wanted to show a few examples here. Here we have a graph that's showing the number of articles per journal title. So again, this is a citation bibliographic analysis. And then under this, we do have a caption where it tells you that it's the number of OER supported peer-reviewed articles per journal. And then it gives you some information about special issues and stuff like that. My recommendation and how I would approach alt text for this type of item would be to say something along the lines of something really simple. graph of articles per journal title. So in looking at that, it feels really basic and super simple, but I know the rest of the document sort of goes into this, the text around this figure goes into this information a little bit more, plus there's the information in the caption. The one thing I would probably add is maybe the number of journal titles we see here. I think it's 10. Yeah, 10. So per 10 journal titles. And I would actually leave it at this. Super basic, really simple, but it conveys that it's a graph portraying how many articles are per these 10 journal titles. And again, this information is sort of discussed throughout the paper. So I'm going to move to the next one because it's a little bit different. So this is a graph showing the articles per funding agency. Again, we have a caption here. There's some more explanatory text that's sort of around this image. So we want to do something kind of in a similar fashion to the one we did before. So I think we have 10 again. So number of articles per top 10 funding agencies. And I would probably leave it at this. So one thing you could include is listing the funding agencies that are stated here. I personally don't think it's necessary, but you could. It would give a little bit more explanation. It would provide a little bit of additional information. I'm not, without reading through the full document again, I know it addresses some of these and calls some of these out explicitly. It may not call out all of them. You could also say number of articles per top 10 funding agencies, including USGS, National Science Foundation, and NOAA, and leave it at that, just to give sort of an idea as to what those agencies are. Let's see what the next one is. So this one is the number of citations received per year. And this one's pretty straightforward and has a little bit of different information, right? So it provides us with the number of articles and also the years that this information was gathered. So I would actually I'd give a little bit more information in this one just because it's a little bit easier to decipher that information without having to go too far into reading through the text. And but also we can keep it really succinct, and that's key. Generally, best practices and guidelines state that you should keep things within maybe a sentence or two. Anything more than that, and we're working on long descriptions, and there's sort of different rules for long descriptions and how they're presented and how they're linked within a document. So the more succinct we can keep things, the better. So for this one, I would probably keep the alt text to something along these lines. Graph of citations received per year from 2002 through 2016. I actually think it's 17, not 16, sorry, 17. It's simple, it's succinct, it gives you the basic idea as to what it is. There's additional information in the caption and again around in the document as well. I see there's a couple questions. I'm going to look through them real quick. So one question is, since the caption is being read, is it important to identify the figure number so the caption, when read out loud, links to it? No, you don't need to, because what a screen reader is going to do is it's going to say figure, and then it's going to read graph of citations received per year from 2002 to 2017, and then it'll say figure 8, non-cumulative number of citations received by all blah, 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 blah. So you do not have to put the figure number in there. You can, if you think it's important. but it is not required. In terms of a best practice, I've seen people make recommendations both ways. We would never, um, my biggest problem with doing it, and again, this is my opinion, my biggest problem with doing it is it does get a little repetitive. So you'd have figure 8 graph of citations, and then it would say figure 8 non-cumulative number. And it's a little repetitive, and also it could be a little confusing. It has the possibility of making it sound like there's multiple figures, and two of them are, tagged as figure 8. It could be a little misleading. So I would personally leave it out, but if you put it in, it's not wrong, and we would never kick anything back to you saying that isn't acceptable. There's a question about figure captions. Should they always be separate text from the graphic? Should they be? Probably, because then it ensures that information is being read separately from the figure. Can they be included? Yes, but you need to be really careful to make sure that text is being read. And a lot of times when you have the figure and the caption together as one and you import them from a source, it tags that text as part of the figure, so it isn't necessarily read. If you were to do it that way, my suggestion would be to take that caption and try to pull it out or draw a text box around it and tag that as text. If for whatever reason that doesn't work, you could, although this is not ideal, use that caption as your alt text. But again, it would be preferred and follow guidelines and best practices to separate out the figure from the text. Someone had a question about the figure that was by funding agency, and they said, could you simply write NOAA has by far the most articles? You could add that into the alt text. I wouldn't leave it as just that's your alt text completely. You could definitely add that in there, and I don't think that would make the alt text too long. It's still succinct, and it still gives the gist of NOAA by far was publishing and citing more of those articles. Oh yeah. All right, I think that's everything so far. Again, I'm trying to bounce back and forth between the two, so I'm sorry if I'm missing some questions here. So I'm going to skip to the next one. I'm going to actually skip over this one because, again, it's just another graph like we've done. I want to get to something a little bit different like this map. So this map has, so this is a map depicting the international publication of OER supported articles. It's a bit of an odd map, and there's even in here information. So this goes to that question I just answered about how to read this map, and you can see it's part of this image. Ideally, we would pull this out and make this its own separate text so that portion is read, so it would have the figure. This would be read as in addition to the caption. I'm not going to do that because when I tried it, it sadly didn't work out, and we do have a caption here. So for something like this, where it's a little difficult to describe this, right? It's hard when you can't see it. So again, there's information below. You can see here a bibliometric mapping. It discusses this a little bit more. There's also the caption. I'm going to keep this really basic and simple. Map showing international publication of articles. On here it says OER supported articles. Because of that, I'm not going to put it in the alt text. And then also, I'm not going to indicate any of this coloring or, what countries are highlighted, because it says countries are colored based on the number of OER supported articles with at least one author from each country. I feel like the caption's kind of catching what most of this is. The other reason I wanted to show this is a possible example of when you may not need alt text. There are some instances where the caption itself for an item covers what your alt text would probably say. And I think there is an argument here that this caption is essentially the alt text for that item. So I'm going to actually remove this, and I'm going to leave it blank. There are, sorry, just want to be careful how I phrase this. There are some instances where it is okay to not have alt text. This would be one of them. The figures caption is essentially what the alt text would be. Another instance is if you have a picture of George Washington and the caption underneath it says Figure 1, George Washington. I don't need to put alt text in there, because all my alt text is going to say is George Washington. So now it's saying figure George Washington, Figure 1, George Washington. That's really repetitive and unnecessary. I'm not saying that you can do this with everything, and if an image has a caption that you don't have to put in alt text. That is not the case. There are very, very specific instances when that happens, and here's an example of one. I have a few more that I'm going to go over, so give me just a second and we'll get to those, okay? The last thing I want to do in here is I want to look at this word cloud, or excuse me, network map. Excuse me, word network map. This, as you can see, has a very, very lengthy description of what this is. So I'm going to actually put alt text in here, but I'm going to keep it incredibly basic. I'm sorry, my typing is terrible today. So word network map of titles of journal articles, and I'm going to keep it super basic because, again, the caption goes into a lot of detail. So I want people to know that this is that network map. And then when it reads figure 14, word co-occurrence network map of the 241 words most commonly, blah, 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 so that it can link those two things together relatively easily. Hopefully that makes sense. So what I want to do now, I'm going to hop from Adobe and I'm going to go into Word real quick, just because I have an easy document pulled up in Word. Okay. I don't know if anybody else remembers this, my template for tech memos and tech reports. I have a couple examples in here of some alt text, so I'm going to find those real quick. So here's one. I have a figure of a harp seal, and my caption says harp seal. For this instance, you would not need to put alt text in this item. We would not need alt text for this figure, because my alt text for this figure would say harp seal. It already says that in figure 1. So we are not going to do alt text for this item. Okay, I have a couple more examples. Here, I have another one of those word network maps. My alt text for this would probably be something along the lines of lab network map showing collaborations. Well, my caption already says lab collaboration network map. I probably won't put in alt text for this item. Here, I have a different type of figure, right? It's a picture of a bobtail squid. But my caption, my figure 3 caption says part of a group of cephalopods related to cuttlefish, blah, 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 blah. So it isn't specifically calling out what this is. This I would add a very simple and basic alt text tag to. So I'm going to right click on the item, click on this little layout option, or excuse me, not layout options, format picture. Sorry, right click, format picture, and then, whoops, go to the alt text. And I've had a number of people do this recently. Do not put your alt text in the title, put it in description. If you put it in title, it will not show up and it will not transfer from Word into Adobe. It wipes out that information. So please put it in description. Title is left blank. So for this figure, I'm going to put in a super basic bobtail squid as the alt text for it. And that's it. That's it for that item. I also want to address this. We have an equation here that would also need alt text. For this item, the alt text that we would be looking for this would simply be, at the very basic level, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. I don't need to know, beyond that is just additional, an extra. I don't need to know what it does. I don't need to know specifically what all of that means, because most likely that's in the surrounding text. The surrounding text goes into what all of those variables mean and what it means when you plug things into that equation. So really, we just need a very basic a squared plus b squared equals c squared, and that's it. Let me check questions. So someone has a question, shouldn't the alt text of some of these figures provide information on what they look like? No, not necessarily. Again, alt text is supposed to be succinct and just convey some really basic information, because generally with figures, those figures are helping to illustrate what's in the text itself. So you don't need to explain that George Washington has white hair and is wearing a fluffy collar. None of that's really important. If it's a picture of a golden retriever, you just say golden retriever. You don't need to tell me that it's a yellow color and has a purple collar. It's not really important. I mean, whether the color's purple or blue, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't impact anything per se. That being said, if there is something very specific about that image, if, gosh, I can't think of a really great example right now. So in the question, they say, in the word map example, wouldn't it be important to say something like a figure with words organized using varying colors and sizes connected with lines? You can say that. It's an option. In terms of, I would shorten that up a little bit more, though. I would say something like network map with words organized using varying colors and sizes. Leave it like that. Or, if you say simply a network map of collaborations with primary offices appearing larger, and leave it at that. It's sort of the very, very basic level, enough that someone could get a general idea, because again, a lot of that description should be within the text. If a picture is there and it's just a picture and it isn't really related to the text, you have to sort of make a decision as to whether that's a background item or a decorative item, as opposed to something conveying information. Someone just said that my volume cut out. Hopefully everyone can still hear me, and if there's an issue, someone will say something additional, but hopefully everyone can still hear me. So we have about 20 minutes left. I want to jump back into Adobe because I'd really like to go over tables really quickly. We have a table in here. I just want to say we do not require tables, but a lot of people, a lot of you that are submitting and a lot of people that are working on 508 have actually been asking a lot of questions about tables. And we really, really appreciate that effort and the extra that you're putting into it. It's really important to have accessible tables, but it is difficult and it does require some extra work. So for those of you that are doing it, thank you. For those of you that aren't, it's okay. I just want to bring some of this up so that people can kind of see it and start thinking about it. We would really like to sort of move up and make all of our documents sort of that level AA requirement completely. We do most of those elements and requirements now, but including tables would really put us at that next level. And I think it'd be really important and helpful for a lot of our users and researchers if we did include this information. So I'm going to do just really briefly on tables, and down the road we'll continue to maybe add in more and more about tables. I also want to leave a little bit of time because I know there's a ton of questions and I have missed a bunch of them. So I'd like to try to answer as many as I can. So when we're looking at tables, we'll see most often everyone has a headers failing. The other table issue that you will see often is summary. And you'll notice here I have summary skipped. I don't care about summaries. You do not need to put in alt text for your tables, and you do not need to put in summaries for your tables. It is not a required element anywhere, or at least not that I'm aware of. It's not required. If you put it in there, that is fantastic. If you don't, that is totally acceptable. We are fine with that. Headers, again, we do not reject documents based on this. When we see people who have tables and their headers are all great, sometimes we will send you a thank you note because that's wonderful. But again, it's not required, and we will never kick a document back based on tables alone. So in this table, it's saying that our headers have failed. What I'm going to do is go into the Z order, excuse me, not reading order, it's called Z order. And you'll see how everything's tagged, right? I'm going to click on the table. Come on. Sorry, I need to open the reading order. What is it? Of course, it's not letting me click on the table. I'm sorry, guys. Give me 1 second here. So as I'm clicking through, while I find the proper tag for this, as I'm clicking through, you can see how it's highlighting all these different sections, right? So it highlighted bibliometric indicator, value, number of publications. This is what we want to see in a data table. We want to see that it has all of these P tags, these text or paragraph tags in here. Because what that does is it means each of those elements are going to be read by a screen reader, okay? Okay, so now that I'm clicked inside the table, now it's showing it for me. You can see that table editor is available, and it's not always available. So when you click out of something and click on something that's not a table, like all this text, this isn't available. But once I'm clicked in the table, table editor is available. When you click on table editor, it turns all this red. And what you can do is you can click in each individual cell. So if I right click in each cell, you have the option for table cell, properties, table editor options. So I'm going to go up to this top one and look at the table cell properties. This is just for the cell that you clicked in. Okay, so since I clicked in this top one, the bibliometric indicator, currently that's tagged as a data cell. It's a header cell. I want to make it a header cell. You also have the option to put the scope of that item. So is that a header cell for the whole row? Is it for the column, or is it for both? This is for the column, so I'm going to mark that as column. And it spans only one column, right? So I leave that as one. It spans only one row. So I leave that as 1, and I'm going to click OK. I'm going to do the same thing for this one, for value. So if you click on it, right-click, Table Cell Properties, it's my header, column, 1 and 1. OK. So now I have my header rows. If I click in this and look at the Table Cell Properties, that's a data cell. It should be a data cell. Same thing here. That should be a data cell. And so on and so forth. You just want to double check those and make sure they're all in there. Okay. You'll also notice there's the table editor options. You can edit the colors and how things are displayed. This is more of like a formatting thing for you, but you're able to sort of mess with it and keep make it so that it's easier for you to see and edit and describe. So the other thing down here is label options. So show cell type, whether it's a table header, table header or a table data cell. I'm going to click on this so everybody can see what it does. And now it'll show you exactly what those tags are. So header, header, data cell, data cell, data cell, so on and so forth. So in theory, now that I did that, if I recheck this, let's see if it works. I got my pass on it. So now my headers are fixed. Table editing and a way to fix one of the most common errors that people get within their tables is just indicating what those headers are. So with that, that's the bulk of what I wanted to cover. I am going to pull up some questions here and see what I missed, because there appears to be a bunch of things. Sorry, let me just find where I was. So someone in the very beginning had asked, had said that they have had issues where alt text created in Word doesn't always translate over when saved as a PDF. Is there a fix for this or a common bug? So there's a couple reasons this could happen. One could be you put that in title as opposed to description. 2, if, I'm going to go back to Word real quick. Instead of saving as a PDF, so when you go to File and do Save as Adobe PDF, it is better to go to Acrobat and then create PDF. This will carry over more of your edits, and it will carry them over one for one more often than not. So I would recommend trying those 2 options. Make sure that it's not in title, and then do create PDF as opposed to save as PDF, and see if that takes care of some of those problems. Let's see what else. Again, if I miss your question, I'm very sorry. I'm going to go through these a little more thoroughly. I just want to try to get in a few before we're done here. And if you have more, even once we're done, feel free to email me, or you can always email the IR account and we can help you out. I am always happy to take a look at a document. We can do one-on-one trainings. We can do office trainings. We're happy to help you out as much as we can related to 508. Yeah, and yes, I think someone said that my harp seal was actually a fur seal, and I think you're correct. But I don't know the difference between seals, so I apologize if I was incorrect there. Someone asked if screen readers understand symbols and formulas. They can. Again, a lot of the screen readers that we utilize and have access to are a little more basic than some that someone with a disability would utilize. So JAWS is the most common screen reader that is used, and so JAWS is very sophisticated. We'll say it's a wonderful product. It's very expensive, which is why I personally don't have access to it. And if you do, I recommend putting your documents through JAWS. It'll give you a really great idea as to what needs to be fixed within them. A lot of screen readers have detailed settings that people can work with so that they can navigate materials better. So some will recognize specific symbols, some will not. It sort of depends on the level of your screen reader or your translator. Um, let's see. So someone also asked about tables. What if a table is not a Word table, but pasted from another application, such as Excel, or it's pasted as an object? If it's pasted as an object, it's going to come in as an object and it'll be tagged as a figure. So I don't have a great example of that. And what you can do in those instances, let's go into here. I have this figure here. There is a way that you can change the tag of an item. So let me see. Let me find a really easy one just for my ease more than anything. Here at the bottom, we have an image, right? We have the NOAA and the DOC logo, which this DOC logo should have better alt text than what it has. But if you right click on that tag, you can change the tag to whatever you want. So say this is supposed to be a table, you can tag it as a table. Except now it's not working. So I'm on the NOAA logo here. I'm going to try to tag it as a table. Of course, it's not going to let me. Of course, now I look like I'm crazy. I promise there's a way you can click on an item. So when you click on a tag, right, we'll just do it in text because of course it's not wanting to cooperate. If you right click, you have the option to change your tag. Okay. The most common thing is, like it was in the question, someone imports a table from some other program, or it's copied over from a PowerPoint slide or something. Adobe is going to view that as a figure. And if you want to change it to a table, all you have to do is click on it and then click on it in your Z order, and then you'll be able to change the tag to whatever you want it to be. So you could change it to a figure, you can change it to a table, so on and so forth. Once you have it as a table, then you can do your table editor. And then that's when you can assign your header rows and do the data cells. So there's a question about tagging in Excel before bringing into Word. I believe the answer is yes. I have not done a whole lot of accessibility work in Excel. That is something I'll probably have to get back to someone on. I will have to get back to you on, Mandy. So I don't have a definite answer. When I do find that information, I will probably put it on the LibGuide under tables for everyone. I have, let's see, it looks like 8 minutes left. So I'm going to try to find a few more questions to answer. Please keep them coming as I'm talking. Someone asked if text boxes are allowed. I read somewhere that they are not compliant. That is correct. Text boxes are not compliant. You shouldn't use them. Usually they'll come in and it'll sort of mess up the tagging structure, and it'll tag them kind of weird as like span or figures, but even then, like sometimes it won't pick up that text at all, and it gets really complicated to sort of fuss with those. So I would recommend avoiding them at all costs. Let's see, what else do we have? So someone has a question about tagging DOI links. I think that's going to have to be a whole separate sort of discussion and webinar, but I'd be happy to do that as possibly our next webinar. We could just focus specifically on tagging URLs and tagging DOI links and stuff like that, I'd be happy to do that. I'll also add some information about that to the LibGuide. I'm sorry, there's quite a few questions, so I'm not sure what I've answered and what I haven't. Again, if you have more, oh, here's one. If you, span tags. So in here, I'm sure you saw on one of these pages, there are things labeled as text, this text that's labeled as span. So span is used in a couple different ways, and technically a screen reader is still going to read something that's tagged as span. However, when you see a span tag, you should do like I did before. You sort of you right click on it and change that span tag over to text. It's a really easy flip over, but I would recommend changing all spans to text, or if it's over a figure, change it to figure. Span can be used, again, like I said, in tables, but it can also be used for links and some other things. So when it is on text, it should be switched over to a text tag. There's a couple ways you can do it. Like I said, you could do you click on it and it will you click on it, do the right click and change it that way. Or you can always, if you have like a large section of text, let me find a large section of text. If you have like a large section of text, say all of this was tagged as span, you can go in and re-tag that section. So reading order, you do your little rectangle and you just draw around it. It'll highlight everything and then you can tag it as text versus the span. So there's two ways you can do it, right? Here's the span here. So when you click on that, I can just change it to text. And now it flipped over to text. Okay. I will plan on covering DOIs and links and references at a later date, but I think the three of those together would make a really great webinar, so we can go over those. When we see stuff like this, when we have like a paragraph and then there's like reference, span, paragraph all thrown in there, we let that go. That's fine for now. It still reads normally for the most part with the screen reader, but there are some things that you need to do to sort of address those issues, and I will go over those in a future brown bag for sure. I think that's a really great question and something we can focus on. With that, I have like 3 minutes here. With that, I'm going to actually stop for the day, but please send any additional questions. I'm going to put some more resources up for everyone. If you have suggestions for future webinars, I am working on creating some shorter videos that we can put on our YouTube channel. If you have suggestions, if there's things that you would like me to cover specifically, let me know. I can always use some ideas. I'd love to hear what everyone's having problems with, as opposed to me sort of trying to figure out what areas everyone needs help with. So please, your feedback is much appreciated. Thank you everyone for coming, and I'm going to leave the recording going, the session open for a little bit so people can get in any questions that they're typing, but I am going to stop the recording now. So again, thank you everybody for coming, and I'll have this posted probably in the next day or two.